Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Anu, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, my dear.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited, and I love the title of your podcast.
It's a lot of, I think we're all going through life. We're all certainly going to experience pain. I hope. If we don't, that's probably a problem as well. If we have it too much, that's a problem. And I think everybody is interested in some version of performance and whatever that means in our own lives. So I think it was like we put it on there years ago because it matches my in-office direction. How do we help you go through pain, heal, and then let's shift our focus to actually like performing and living healthy. But it has taken on a new world.
The word performance, what does that mean to you? I was curious.
I think really to me, it means being intentional of being able to do the activities that you want to do. Somebody that might mean hiking, somebody that might mean like getting on the floor and playing with their grandkids. And that's the exciting part is everybody can take that and should be intentional about bringing that into their life. How do I want to perform on a day-to-day level that makes me happy with my own goals? And then if they take that and we break that down, now we've got something we can fix, we can work towards.
Right. Because it's connected to something that they deeply care about. Makes sense.
It's very interesting. I did not expect to start here, but we're here. How much we talk about like motivation and like tying the why into how somebody is going to get there. And I've had a lot of patients come in and they're like, I just can't get going. I just don't have the motivation. And as I was researching more and more, we've done a number of gut health, like talks or at different points in time. But as I was researching for our conversation and some of the information that you've put out, I came across some very interesting stuff around gut health and motivation, like how that leads to, some of the different, hormone profiles that allow us to feel motivated and get motivated. What's your thoughts on that? Can we unpack that a little bit?
I mean, even just from a microbial picture, microbial diversity, and you look at athletes, for example, lots of research connecting that people who are active, who are, I think there was a research done on rugby players, and they realized that, gosh, these people have much better microbial diversity. They have a lot of these. And it has to be somehow connected to moving your body and, using your body in just this intentional way that you speak of. And that results in having these microbes they are your forever guests. They are in there, whether you like it or not. And they're doing a lot of behind the scenes work for you. And in these athletes, in these rugby players, in these runners, you see more of that. You see more of that, diversity. You see more of that short chain fatty acids. You see that energy producers. And that's a great, it's a good hint that everything is going well. And in the other way around too, if you are taking care of your microbiome, then you're able to really bring those cravings down, bring those cravings that really hit all of us at some point, right? And also increase our desire to move. So there seems to be a bi-directional situation here, and I find that fascinating. That just these little gut microbiome holds the key to so much.
I don't think it's anywhere that it's where somebody would start. Like, I just haven't had the motivation to show up at the gym every day. Like, I'm struggling with that. I've got the don't want, as people say. Maybe that's an internal thing. That's not like a mental thing. Is your body able to produce enough dopamine in a regular day to get you moving? And if not, that's a gut issue, right?
And it could be that, it could be a mitochondrial issue, because if you're feeling fatigued, when you think about the mitochondria, which are the little batteries in your cells, they have an ancient relationship with bacteria. They came from bacteria and through a process called endosymbiosis. So they respond really well to the microbial signals. So when your microbiome, just for everyone to really get on the basic understanding of the microbiome, we have microbes everywhere, on us, in us. But in our gut, in our colon, we have trillions of bacteria that have always been there. So we've had this symbiotic partnership with them, meaning in simple terms, it's like I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And so the bacteria are, we give them good fuel, and for them, the fuel is fiber. That's how we've co-evolved with them. We've said, hey, listen, I'm not going to be digesting the fiber. It's your job. I'm giving you a place rent-free. Do that for me. And so they digest the fiber and they produce these incredible compounds, Derek, short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate. So this mitochondria and the mitochondrial health is connected to that. They use that butyrate and the energy increases. They use that as an energy fuel. So if you could see this cascading thing of events, you're not motivated because you're tired, you're fatigued. Why are you fatigued? You're not fueling your body. You probably are, have a lot of inflammation. And all inflammation starts in the gut. And gut is, the digestive process is one of the most inflammatory things we can do to our body.
Yeah.
So if we can cut down that inflammation, then you're more excited to do the things that you love because you're not fatigued. The mitochondrial health is better. So as you can see, we just need to connect the dots. It's not one thing. It's not about saying, I don't have the willpower. And this is probably something we all hear, right? Oh, I don't have the willpower to stick to a diet. I don't have the willpower to get up in the morning and go work out or whatever. But if you see that your body is so much more complicated and amazing and unique, and it's doing so much behind the scenes, then it becomes a little bit easier to handle, and you stop blaming yourself. And I think that's what we all need to do, is saying, take a chill pill. It's not you. It's your microbiome.
I mean, this is why I like these conversations, is because if you look online, we have such a short attention span that we tend to put stuff out that's like the magic bullet, right? It's like, this is the one thing that improves your gut. Here's the 3 things you should eat that will give you energy. And it's like, I get that. You're trying to get people where they're at, where they can take a little tiny action. And I do love these little like compounders, these small multiplying actions that lead to other things. But we should still go into that knowing that that's just a trick on our psychology, that these things are more, there's more depth to it than, you looking for the one thing that's going to, improve, gut health or any of that stuff. It's a very interconnected system that has feed forward and feedback loops, and don't let that scare you away from improving. It should be fun. It makes it like it's a puzzle that we're trying to put together. That's how I think of it. I'm like, oh, this is exciting. I've got a little gut thing happening. What happened? What did I eat? What can I do to improve it?
Yeah. And you're right. And that's what we do in today's world, right? We try to get people's attention however you can, as hopefully we're doing it in a very authentic from a heart space, rather than a business, because we're not in the business of just making money. We're in the business of caring for people and making them feel better or taking them to a better place. So that's always a bone of contention for me, that you bring it up, that we have to be very authentic in that.
When we break down the gut, I think everybody thinks of like the gut in different ways. It's one of the things that we're never really educated super well on what the gut actually is. If you could give us a quick overview so that like people have some reference of like when we're talking about the gut, what in the body does that encompass?
Yeah. It's one of the your digestive process is one of the most complicated things. It starts well before you even take a bite of your spaghetti and meatballs. It starts when you or your partner is cooking in the kitchen and you're getting that whiff of, oh, that's that marinara sauce right there bubbling. That's when digestion really begins. It all begins with the senses. It begins in the mouth. The mouth is where I'm sure our listeners have heard that chewing is so important. So this is one of the Western things that are happening today. We are not chewing our food, but digestion begins in the mouth. And when you don't chew your food, you're putting a lot of burden further down the digestive tract, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine. So we need to just take that food and chew it until it's almost like a smoothie or a juice, because there are enzymes in the mouth, like amylase, salivary amylase, or lipase that break down the carbohydrates and fat in the food. And if we start chewing it, we produce more saliva and we produce these enzymes that break down and make this whole digestive process a lot easier. And why is that important? Because when we do more of that, the inflammation comes down. We have less of an inflammatory response to food. We have oral tolerance in the mouth. We're like today, I don't know about in your neck of the woods, but I really feel like so many people come to me with digestive issues, but they also come with food allergies.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take this. I can't tolerate this. I can't eat this. I'm allergic to peanuts, corn,
Yeah.
gluten, you name it. They're allergic to so many things. And that was never the case when I was younger. It was like I'd never even heard of an EpiPen. When did this change? What happened? And I think a big part of it is oral tolerance. We're not eating, we're mono eating. We're eating the
Yeah.
same foods in the name of convenience.
Do you also think that that is a processing thing? I mean, I had this conversation with a patient yesterday who just got back from a few weeks in Europe, and her husband is has a gluten allergy here to the point where it's like it inflames him. He gets like GI distress. He gets systemic inflammation when he eats gluten. Even like a one heavy meal here, and he'll have severe GI distress for like 24 to 48 hours. She was like, now over there, and we can unpack this because there's a lot in it. She was like, we were eating pasta, we were eating bread, we had the best pizza I've had, and he ate all of it and he felt fine the whole time. So
When you look at that, I feel like you said there's a lot to unpack. First
yeah,
of all, they're on holiday, which means what? Their cortisol is down, the stress is down, they're relaxing. But there is some truth to the monocropping that we do in the United States. There are not that many wheat crops, so we tend to eat the same thing. Anytime you eat the same thing over and over again, your body just responds with a reaction in some people, Not to say there's no gluten intolerance in, let's say, Europe, Italy. I mean, every time I go there, I see so many gluten-free products, and I bet you anything, it's for the locals too. It's not just for us Americans that they
yeah.
have it out there, and that never used to be in the 90s or 80s. So it's a global phenomenon that's happening, and is there what's going on behind it? I think it's our own digestive capabilities are decreasing because we're not opening ourselves to eating more diverse foods
Yeah.
and
The other part
varieties.
that why I said there was unpacking, because I've experienced that where it's like you just feel digestively way better whenever you're doing that. But the question I've always asked people when they come back is like, well, how much were you walking every day? How much were you moving every day? And for them, she was like, oh, I mean miles. Like you walk everywhere. And I was like, right. Like how much are you walking here? Like we're lucky if we get you over 4,000 steps.
Absolutely. You hit
And
it right on the nail.
what's
That's, yeah.
like when we're doing that, what's turning on? Let's get like a little bit of the science. Like my wife is one of these. If when we're over there, she can eat. She never gets, kind of like bloating, gut dysfunction, any of that stuff, even like acid reflux, all that goes down. And we tie it mostly to activity. Like if we're walking, all of this. So how does the activity in the gut like enhance or, cause dysfunction in each other?
Well, I think, first of all, the bloating and all of that digestion, as I said, is a very inflammatory process. So when you're walking or when you're active, it's so much easier on the digestion. You're not sitting because it also depends on what you're eating, right? A simple meal will probably take about 30 minutes to digest. But if you take in like a high, heavy protein kind of meal, let's say a steak, potatoes, all of that, it takes much longer and it lingers, it sits there and it takes longer. But as you exercise and move your body, the digestion process is faster. You're massaging your internal organs. Everything is moving a little bit quicker. You're not as constipated. Activity kind of lubricates, increases that peristalsis, that wave-like motion that moves the food down quicker. So many things are happening in the whole digestive tract. So exercise and movement is a key to healthy digestion. So any person who comes to me says, I'm so constipated, one of the first things I say is, how much movement is in your life? What do you do for movement? I don't say exercise. As long as you're moving, how about neat activities? How many things that are not non-exercise related? Are you sitting like this all day in front of your computer and you're not moving? And that's a recipe for disaster because your digestion is short. Your joints are going to ache. We are not meant to do this.
Yeah. The like people that I have seen who have started to get better gut health stuff, I feel like there's always some lead domino for them. I've had some people where it was exercise. I had a conversation yesterday where it was sugar. They were like, as soon as I started to pull sugar out, I just started to feel like my gut was better. This is their words. And to me, that was just like, they were like, my digestion feels better. And that led to more energy, kind of what you were talking about earlier, which led to, okay, well, now I'm going to walk. Like I feel okay. And as they started walking, it got even better. So they were like, well, if I got sugar out now, like maybe I should start paying attention to the other things that I'm eating. If changing sugar made me feel this much better, like what happens if I start pulling out chips and if I stop drinking, for her, it was diet soda. I'll out her. So like that process, like what's the lead domino that gets these systems in place? For most of the people you work with, what do you see for that? What's those like starting blocks that starts to build momentum?
So in my program, my program is based on all the research I've done over the years, and it's called MBHR: microbiome first, brain, hormones, and reframing mindset. They're all important, right? But the first thing is fixing the microbiome. So maybe I can walk you through a case study, so to help you
Would love that.
really kind of connect the dots. So I had a client come to me. She was a runner, and even just look at how I said it. She was a runner because she wasn't a runner when she came to me, and that was the deepest sadness that she had. She identified with being a runner. She'd gone to several doctors, done a lot of tests, looked at anything that could be autoimmune related, but she had incredible pain, joint pain, and to the point where she couldn't run. And so here she is sitting in front of me and tears. I don't know, I can't run anymore. And that is the only joy for me. And that is one of the reasons I asked you about performance, because it's always connected to a joy factor. Like for her, running was her joy. That was everything, her ikigai, her purpose. And when she couldn't do it, it just was the pits for her. She'd gone from doctor to doctor searching for answers. Her labs were normal, but her gut had taken a beating. She could barely even walk, and she had gained weight. So when I look at someone like that, of course, what I'm hearing her say is running, but I'm also hearing her saying, this is not the body that I'm used to. This body with like 30, 40 pounds of excess weight, I don't like this. So the immediate, our impulse is, let's fix that. Let's get them to lose the weight.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for us to do that, we need to understand what's going on. I think of weight gain as a symptom. So there's something else going on in there. So we start connecting the dots. We look at her mindset, and the very first thing we do is really take an intake history, like listen to her story, because her story definitely, Derek, is different from mine or yours, right?
Yeah, right.
And as I listened to this girl, I realized that she'd always eaten poorly, in the sense that she was like on the run. She would do all of that, but she would eat. She would give herself oh, I ran, so I'm going to eat this. So she would eat like a burger or some fries or bacon or something like that. But everything was fine because she was running and she was active. She wasn't gaining the weight. And her microbes, runners usually have more butyrate, which is like an energy compound, right? So her mitochondria was okay. She wasn't feeling the fatigue. Once that stopped, and I don't know what the domino effect here is. We can only speculate. I am thinking it was like a ticking time bomb. She wasn't feeding herself really well. She was really low in micronutrients. She was eating all the foods that were creating some kind of a cascade of symptoms. But because she was so active, high on endorphins, she probably missed a lot of those little clues about health. She was in the high of running, right? And then suddenly it all kind of broke down. Her body broke down. And she's looking at this thing, and it's not very different. She was eating poorly all the time, but she's now has symptoms to deal with. So it didn't make sense for me to deal with the symptoms. It made more sense for me to fix what was broken, and that was her eating pattern.
Yeah.
So we laid out the plan for her and said, listen, I think the first thing we need to do is have you just taken more micronutrients. Your body is not nourished. When you're not nourished, you're going to go after all these dopamine giving foods like sugar and chips and things like that. But your body, evolutionarily speaking, is looking for two nutrients. It's looking for protein, it's looking for fiber to feel satiated. How many of your hyperpalatable foods, those little packages, have either of these ingredients? The food industry is
Almost
not
none.
good. Will they put protein in there? Of course not, because then they're not going to sell 10 bags of chips. So when we laid this out, she was like, light bulb moment. She was like, okay, I hear, but will I lose weight? I said, well, what is the goal? What is the end goal? So we made a 3-month goal. And in that end of the 3 months, it was weight loss. It was running again. And I said that reframing your words matter. You cannot say I was a runner. I am a runner. So go into it with I am a runner, and we'll look at it. So phase 1 was all about adding micronutrients. And like you said, she had so many triggers, sugar, wheat. She did have like an underlying problem with gluten. We didn't know at the time if it was gluten or wheat. We just kind of took all of those out. But we didn't just take things out, we just really enriched her diet with a lot of micronutrients coming from fruits and vegetables. So her microbiome has that fuel, has that fiber to work with. And within 3-4 weeks, she was feeling so much better. Her pain had decreased. Her CRP, which is the C-reactive protein, doctors couldn't figure out why her number was so high. Just in 4 weeks, all of her numbers came down. She lost about 10 pounds without even trying.
Yeah.
Now we have a client who's convinced.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talk about weight loss. Then we talk about how do we make this into maintenance.
Right.
It's a great thing.
In something
Everybody
long
loses
term.
weight. You can starve and lose weight. You can be on a juice cleanse and lose weight. 80% of people who lose weight gain it back. And why is that? Because they haven't quite figured out the real reason. Why are they doing it? How do you maintain it? So that's where the microbiome becomes. It's the key. You start feeding them, they're going to feel this, that GLP-1 we talk about all the time, and Ozempic and all of that. That's naturally being produced when you eat fiber. You're feeling satiated. You don't have the regular uptick of that like you do in a drug, but if you consistently eat this way, it's a good chance you're not going to gain weight.
Yeah. Exercise as well. When we talk about
And
GLP-1s,
exercise.
right? And like,
Yeah.
you're like, hey, you have this for free. I
Yeah.
know you could spend, $1,000 a month, but we have triggers that you have this for free. Your body will give it to you.
And exercise is something that it's usually in month 3 that I start having conversations. At first, everything happens in the kitchen with weight loss. 90% of weight loss is in the kitchen. But that inflammatory response, that's where exercise, oh my gosh, that is so important, especially for our women in perimenopause, menopause stages, or our men, older men, who really struggle with sarcopenia or muscle loss. So important to strength train. And that is one thing that I concur with all of the experts, because I feel like we do need to exercise. We are not, as a nation, moving enough.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem.
When it comes to someone like that, I have many patients that you just described. I have a few family members that you just described. What kind of testing, when we're talking about microbiome first, what kind of testing should we be looking at? What kind of testing shouldn't we be looking at? Because I know there's a lot out there and people are kind of getting over inundated with like, you need to test this, you need to pay for this test, you need to do this one. What's helpful for people to take action in these situations?
Okay. So I work with people from different socioeconomic, situations. Some people say, Anu, is this going to be covered by insurance? Is this, that's reality today, right? We have people different. Other people can afford more testing. Some people say, listen, I am going to invest in a test so I know. They're more data driven. They want numbers. So they're willing to spend the money to get to the next point. So I keep that open and I talk to clients and say, what is it that you want? If they say, listen, I love numbers, I love data, I need to see, then I introduce the gut test. So what we have now, Jarek, as far as I would say technology, we're in a much better place. We have a technology called whole genome sequencing or shotgun sequencing. And with this kind of sequencing and technology, the lab can actually look at your fecal sample and kind of look at what's in your colon, who's in your colon. So it's a pretty good representation of the bugs in your colon. How many bugs do you have? How much diversity do you have? Do you have any, not just focusing on pathogenic bacteria, but looking at the good guys too? Who are the good guys that is present? What kind of functions are they doing for you? So it kind of really is exciting for clients to say, wow, this is what's happening. But of course, it's just a screenshot, right, of what's happening. But it's enough to get them excited about maybe long term, I do need to care of my microbial partners because we're only 10% human. So once that sinks in, that we are largely microbial, we have way more microbial cells than human cells, something shifts. They become responsible for their forever guests. And I don't have to do anything else to convince them to eat more fiber or make their diet more diverse. They assume the responsibility. So I would say that test is really, it's not that expensive, and it's a good starting point. But if someone came to me and saying, listen, I don't have the money to spend on that, I just need to get from point A to point B, then there's always intake. You take a really good, solid intake on a person, you realize there is no way this person has the kind of diversity we're talking about with the kind of fuel we're feeding. I mean, if you tell me
Yeah.
what you eat in a day or in a month, I can tell you, are you feeding them? Or are you starving them? That's not rocket science. It's just based on, research that tells us that fiber is the one fuel that they really require. And if you're low in fiber, there's a good chance that you're starving them. So we could go that route too.
Yeah.
So,
I like that. I heard somebody say this, and I've tried to debunk it, and I think I would get behind it. It was like, if you gave me your diet and you hit your protein goals and your fiber goals, almost no matter what else is around those two things, you probably are healthy. And I've like kicked that around for a while. I'm like, man, I might be on board with that. I never like, as we talked about it, these like super simplistic things.
yeah.
But as I've done that, I'm like, I think if you hit
Come on,
fiber and you're hitting
that.
protein, yeah, go ahead.
Let's unpack this. What does protein do? Protein is satiating, it fills you up. Let's say you're starting your morning with some protein. You're getting good amount of leucine, you're getting that muscle protein synthesis, you're in a good place. You're getting that fiber. Fiber is satiating, it fills you up. With these two ingredients on your plate has protein, has fiber, maybe a little bit of good fats like avocado or olive oil. Where is the room for all the junk in the world? There is no room. You're going to be so full. If I gave you a brownie and think, gosh, I know I'd love to eat it, but I am so full,
Yeah,
girl, I can't do this.
right.
And that's the reasoning behind whoever said that to you. And I think there's some truth to that, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
always say anchor your plate with protein. Anchor the protein. Surround with fiber. So imagine that plate. It's beautiful colors around. You have the protein of your choice. This is where we get really so dogmatic. It's like everyone's saying, oh, this is the best protein. Animal protein is better than plant protein. It's all BS. We have enough research now that says eat the protein that you want and that is sustainable for you. If you give animal protein to a vegetarian, they may do that for a week or so, but then they're going to say, oh, I don't feel good with it. I can't digest it. I feel heavy. So it becomes either a cultural thing or what they're used to, or the other way around. If you ask someone to completely cut out animal protein because of whatever reason, their cholesterol or something like that, that's not going to be sustainable either. So I think protein needs to be left to as an individual choice. What we do know is feeding the microbiome, and that's
yeah.
coming from plant sources. And
Is there a time frame to get to these things? So like, if you're not eating animal protein, like the bacteria that would help you digest that, they've got to be getting overcrowded by the bacteria that are helping you digest plant protein, right? Like, does that make sense? Like, would it take time for you to start feeding your body a different source for it to build up that biome that helps you digest that?
do you mean for someone who's on a more of a plant forward diet and
I
who's
think either one. Like, I'm seeing both now. I'm seeing people who are on like, vegetarian, but they're not as healthy as they want to be. And I'm also seeing a lot of people try this, kind of carnivore type diet. And when they try to introduce these other foods, they all feel bad, whichever way they are. And
and
my
that is
question from that is like, have you just not fed the bacteria that would help with that? So you need to go slow with it so your body
absolutely.
could start to build that up. Like, you weren't eating those foods. The bacteria that lives on those foods is not in enough numbers for you to just turn it back on.
Yeah, so it cannot be an overnight thing because the bacteria takes time to have more of those bacteria to help you digest the food. Like, let's say plant sources like cellulose. We don't have the ability to digest it. So if we've never been eating plant sources and all of a sudden the doctor tells you, Hey Derek, your LDL is sky high, man. You've got to eat some fiber. And you're like, okay, I better just bring in, and you go crazy shopping for lots of different veggies. Your gut is going to react because it takes time. You don't have the enzymes, you don't have the key bacteria to help you break that down. So it's going to be an adjustment process, whichever way you look at it, more animal protein or plant protein. But the thing, Derek, I think our listeners need to be aware of is all the research shows that by the time the food reaches the colon, we largely assume that the protein is digested because protein digestion happens in the upper parts of digestion. So by the time we get to the colon, it's only the fiber that remains. And that is the reason, evolutionary speaking, these gut bacteria feed on that as fuel. But there is something called proteolytic fermentation or protein fermentation that happens in the colon. And why or when does that happen? It happens in people, I've seen this on tests, where people have really high proteolytic fermentation or protein fermentation. So when I see protein fermentation in a colon situation where your gut bacteria is digesting protein, that's not a good thing because they were not, evolutionarily speaking, they didn't evolve with us to digest the protein. But there are pathogenic bacteria that have just kind of said, okay, if this is the only thing that you're going to feed me, I'm going to eat it. But then what they do is they start producing a lot of toxic metabolites like hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is that rotten egg smell. If your gas is smelly, that's like a hint. Ammonia, a lot of methane production, and that's an immediate response to like, oh, I'm constipated, or gut motility is slowed down. So many of these toxic metabolites could be the aftermath of too much protein. It could be too much protein or that you're not digesting the protein, one of the two. And how do you fix that? The answer is not to say, oh, I'm not going to eat animal protein at all. The answer is anchor that protein, surround with fiber.
Gotcha.
So you're giving them the food that they want. You're eating what you need for you're fueling your muscles, but at the same time, you have enough fiber in your diet.
Yeah, I was telling you before we got started that like we've started to see a number of people who have lost weight, and they have reduced their overall mass, but certainly using like a GLP-1 or something like that. But they have not gotten healthier. Their gut is definitely more dysregulated. Their inflammation is higher. Their muscle mass is lower. And it's interesting the way that you put it, where it's like the weight is more of the symptom than the problem. Because we say that about pain, that when you come in with pain, that's not the problem. That is the symptom of the problem, that your body's trying to tell you, hey, here's what it is. If your body's holding on to all of these things and we're gaining weight, that makes sense to me that your body is using that as some mechanism for another problem.
Absolutely. I mean, even when you talk about pain, think about the gut and the gut-brain axis. That's a bidirectional thing. The gut is sending messages to the brain, and the brain is sending messages to the gut. But the gut is sending way more messages to the brain, and the gut is called the second brain. And it's all happening through the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. And if your gut is inflamed, you're really having gut issues. Your pain tolerance what are the signals your brain is getting? There's going to be more pain. Your nerves are going to be a little bit more afraid. Your response to pain is a lot deeper than if your gut was calm. You had more of the GABA. 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. That is your calming. I know some people call it the happy hormone. I don't know if that's the accurate definition of serotonin. And although the vagus nerve doesn't directly take these hormones that are produced in the gut to the brain, the receptors really take in the messages to the brain. So the GABA, that is your calming neurotransmitter, serotonin, all of that is in tune, and your gut is, when your gut is balanced. Just that should be enough for someone to say, I need to start taking care of my gut.
Yeah. The vagus nerve is one of my favorite nerves. We see a lot of that and tap into it from that standpoint of, can we get your vagus nerve has been so overrun. Probably this is the first time I've put this together, but to me, if the vagus nerve has been reporting problems from the gut for a long time, I could see where that pathway kind of gets desensitized to where it's like, it's so easy for the vagus nerve to be like, like, hey, problem. And we see inflammation rise in those cases. And if we go in and treat the vagus nerve, I'm sure you've seen some of this stuff. The latest research is like, we can affect systemic inflammation by treating the vagus nerve and at least get a head start on how much inflammation the body is. But if we stop there and we don't treat the real problem, which is like, why was the vagus nerve communicating that?
Yeah.
Why was the vagus nerve doing that so much? That's got to be the vagus nerve's problem, is to talk between the brain and the gut. Yeah. So if all we do is treat it,
even dealing with the vagal tone is more like a band-aid. Yeah. I mean, it's great when someone's going through all of this, telling them, hey, what can we do to strengthen your vagal tone? I use many things like gargling, singing, humming, to help them, because what all of this does is, yes, it's all backed by a certain amount of research, but it gives the individual some control. Listen, I'm doing this, and this, so let's see if it helps me feel better. And somehow you gain back some of the control. And I think you'll agree with me, especially with someone with chronic pain, they feel so out of control. They feel like, what can I do? How can I make my life better?
I'm speaking in real time because we have a program that when people come to us with systemic inflammation, like we know that they have high C-reactive protein. One of the things we do on that is we do vagal nerve stimulation under ultrasound guidance. So we go in under ultrasound, we go right to the vagus nerve, and we do a light form of stimulation that's been proven to reduce inflammation, even in like arthritic cases. And we give them a couple of things to do dietarily. The first one is to like start decreasing sugar, because in our experience, that one is like an early win. Like they feel better really quickly. But as we're talking about this, I'm like, we're not talking to them enough about gut health. Like if you're in that thing, and we really like pride ourselves on trying to get you to long-term resolution, and we do get these early wins. They start decreasing inflammation. We're pulling a little bit of sugar out, hopefully a lot, listeners. In South Louisiana, we eat too much sugar. But like as we're talking about this, I'm like, there's no way that we're carrying that conversation far enough of, hey, we're getting the early win, but you have to follow through with this, or the reason this was all happening is still going to be there.
Yeah. And that's really challenging because you're already doing so much with the patient. And gut itself is just another big thing, I mean, and it takes time for people to change their way of eating. Eating is so social, eating is personal, eating is cultural. And that's one of the reasons in all my programs, I build cohorts. I build cohorts based on where they come from, their culture, their family, so I respect their traditions. And it's not about one type of food. If I give let me give you an example. If I give someone who's, let's say, from South Asia, like an Indian, or I tell them, you've got to eat Mediterranean food. They might respect me for a few days because Anu seems to know what she's doing. But in 2 weeks, they're going to go back to their dal and their roti and whatever, which is their cultural staple. Same thing with different cultural things. You have to find there are healthy foods in every culture. So I dig into that. I think, what is it that you enjoy doing? How can we just take that and make it healthier for you? So you stick to it. That's sticking to something, that's sustainability, that's where the key is. If they can even do 70-30 for the rest of their life, they're not going to gain the weight back. They're going to be free of pain. They're going to have lower inflammation. Those are all things that are a given when diet and lifestyle are top notch,
When people are making the change, I do want to get to like stress and some of that stuff, but when like going back to your runner, when people are making some dietary changes to focus on microbiome and micronutrients, what's some of the big things that they should like incorporate and avoid? So like, what did y'all bring in dietarily? What did you like, hey, try and make that off limits?
That's a great question, Derek. And you said earlier on that that you'd notice about sugar, right? What I've noticed is that there are some common triggers that, like today, that really cause more inflammation in most clients. We don't know that. Walking into a situation with a client, we don't know what works for that person's body, what doesn't. So, but we have some information that things like gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, alcohol. I say alcohol because alcohol is an acute toxin that people don't think about, and it's causing a lot of inflammatory situations in your liver's working overtime to be digesting that. So we tell them just for 2 to 3 weeks, can we just say no to these just to see how your body responds to it? And then bring in lots of different variety of foods, lots of vegetables, fruits, good sources of protein, whatever that may be, based on your cultural, preferences.
Yeah.
And we clean out the diet. Then we start talking about toxins. We live in a very toxic world. There are lots of toxins around us, in the water, in our foods, glyphosate, you name it. So we don't go into all of it like from day one because it's overwhelming, but we just go based on what the client wants. If the client notices that maybe they're stuck in their weight loss journey, then we start examining, could these xenoestrogens or these obesogens, endocrine disruptors that come from plastic, hold the key? I had a very interesting case in my practice where this gentleman was losing weight steadily and he was so proud of himself. And then all of a sudden it stalled. I knew there was no way he was close enough for set point. He hadn't plateaued yet. I knew that, just because of the journey and stuff. But he said, Anu, nothing is happening. It's stalled, and he was so disappointed because he felt like he was doing everything that I had suggested to him and then some. So again, we stepped back and we listened to the conversation, and I asked him, where do you eat lunch? And I said, I don't even eat at the cafeteria. Wife packs me a lunch and I take it to work and I eat it there and all of that stuff. And I said, how does she pack it for you? And he said, I don't know. She just packs it in a box. So then I said, can we get your wife on the phone? And the wife came on and she said, Susan, what's happening? And she said, yes, I do pack his lunch. The lunch is in a Tupperware. And the next question I asked her was, do you do it right after supper? Is it really warm, hot? She said, yes. Is that a problem? So I thought, well, maybe there's a connection here. Maybe the plastic is leaching into the food and it's causing that xenoestrogenic effect. And two, I said, can we stop this as an experimental goal? Because I don't know if this is the reason, but let's see if this holds the key. So in 2 weeks, he was back on track to losing weight.
Did they just switch to glass or?
Yeah. And so I didn't have to convince them to switch to glass. If I had had this conversation early on, they said, oh, gosh, Anu, that costs a lot of money. I don't know if I could do all of that. And
yeah, how big of a deal could that be? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I didn't have to do anything. He said, hey, we just went to Costco on Saturday. We just bought a whole set of Pyrex. Our kitchen's like all glass, no plastic. I said, yay, that's a win.
Yeah. I feel like that's such a challenging space for people because we're like, it's all around us. And, the little bits that we can do of avoiding, certainly temperatures. Should we just avoid plastic altogether, or is it more that the temperature changes
It's
would
temperature,
release
it's
that?
acid, heat, all of the fats. Really try to buy all of your oils in glass bottles. You may be spending a bundle on the best olive oil from Sicily or something like that. But if it's in plastic, you are going to be swimming in microplastics. You know, I mean, there's only so much we can all do, right? We
Right.
have to choose our toxins. And this is something I share with a lot of my podcast hosts. They say, how do you say toxin free? I said, that's impossible. Living in this world, you're just going to be bombarded by toxins. But intentionally, what are some toxins that we can avoid? Some people say, I'm really nervous about mercury. Then you start looking at your fish sources. Then you say, okay, I don't want the big fish. I'm going to try the smaller fish that have a lower mercury load. Rice has arsenic. Learn how to cook rice and pick one or the have a variety of different rices so you don't get into this rut of having the same kind that increases arsenic. I color my hair. That's my big vanity. This is a non-negotiable for me because I'm on podcasts all the time and it really bothers me to see all this gray everywhere. So I have researched the heck out of it, trying to find the best color for my hair without all the junk in it. Is it perfect? No. Everything comes with a price to pay, right? But this is the best that I can do. So where I cut down is I don't paint my nails, I don't do all of this stuff. I really eat healthy. So I try to control what I can control. And that's all anyone can do, I think.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit. I could keep going down that rabbit hole. We were talking about like going to nail salons, and somebody was talking about like, yeah,
That's a very southern thing, right?
it is. And they were talking about it and talking about, just you walk in there and you're just smelling chemicals. And they were like, oh, if you have certain issues, then, you're really not supposed to go there. I was like, think about that. Like, yeah, if you're moderately healthy, we can poison you a little bit. But, if you're, going through health problems, if you're pregnant, if you have, any of these issues, then we don't want you to go in there. I'm like, that they're telling you that
Yeah.
this is bad, but you're healthy enough that it's just going to make you a little bit sick. So, you won't fuss at us too much.
Yeah, food for thought, ladies. Women have way more autoimmune issues than men. Why is that?
That is a great. I like that. I'm like, if we talk about all of these types of things, who's using the lion's share of them? Is there a correlation there? That's good. Let's talk about stress. So we mentioned it a little bit. What's the connection between stress, cortisol, inflammation, gut health? Let's kind of tie those pieces together for the listeners.
Well, I mean, there's no escaping stress, right? When you think about stress, we think about cortisol, and a lot of people think of cortisol as like a bad hormone. It's not. It's just that when do we make more cortisol is the important question. We need enough cortisol in the morning to wake up and feel perky and ready to start the day. We don't want too much cortisol in the evening when we're just resting up, and we want our melatonin to be higher so we can go to sleep naturally. So when these hormones are produced is very, very important. And the one thing I do notice in people who are trying to lose weight is they always complain about belly fat. And fat is where all of the toxins store up. And belly fat is visceral fat. Visceral fat is fat that's around our organs, and they have a lot of cortisol receptors. So we really have to think about stress and fat and where's the connection. So I think that's one of the reasons I feel like if we're able to have a better handle on stress, that's one of the key factors of bringing that weight down, really helping us with even just our definition of pain, and so many different things. Just being in nature, finding things that work for you. In my practice, we do a lot of breath and mindfulness, how you eat, how you chew, how you kind of slow down that life. We are in a rush today.
Yeah.
I don't even get it. What is the rush? Why are we rushing? And everyone feels so good to say, I am so busy all the time. There's almost like a shame in saying, I'm just chilling and
No,
relaxing.
I'm not doing anything. Yeah.
And so I think that needs more and more people need to speak up and say, this is not a human thing. We weren't set up to be working this hard. Is that okay to say? Can I say that? Can I say, I don't want to be this busy? That doesn't make me a lazy person. That makes me a smart person who's taking care of me first. If I fall, my health fails, who's going to pick up the pieces? No one else can, right?
Yeah.
So I go with that mindset with stress, because it's usually the CEO types. It's like, oh, I'm so stressed. I can't disconnect. What does that say? That, if you are really stressed, but you're doing really great at work, there's a good chance that there are other parts in your life that are failing. You cannot be giving the same kind of attention to everything in your life. You pick one. So chances are that CEO's family is struggling. He or she is not spending time with the family, their children, and they're all connected.
Yeah.
Because we feed on love, we feed on connections. And if that's absent, I'm sorry, this was kind of a completely different, I don't know if you expected that, but I feel like
No.
we
Yeah.
talked enough about gut, but I feel like this is so important.
No, I see a lot of these people. That's why I asked that. It's like I have a lot of the patients who are in the 30 to 50 range who are like, you look at their diet and you're like, man, they're eating a lot of whole foods. They exercise. The one thing I would say is they almost are like the over exercisers. Like they're the ones who can never miss.
That can also cause cortisol.
Yeah. And that's why I say that. It's like it's that specific demographic. On paper, you would say you're doing everything right. And yet they come to us and they seem to have a lot of gut issues. And they're like, I'm eating this. I've done elimination diets. I've done, all these, different protocols. And yet I'm still having, these gut issues. And when we look at it, it always seems that there's some level of stress and drive, that they can't turn off, even with all the other things. I mean, this is what we've talked about, right? Like none of these work in isolation. But it's fascinating because it's a very strong group that we see.
Yeah, and that is one of the first things that I ask, is your stress levels. Are you on the go all the time? How do you handle stress? Because that gives me a good clue of your digestion. Because when you think about digestion, when is digestion happening? It's rest and digest. Not when you're chased by the tiger.
Mm-hmm.
We are being chased by the tiger all the time. So if a CEO is eating and talking on the phone, talking to his secretary or whatever, there's 100% I can tell you that food is not getting digested.
Yeah, your body's like, we can't do that right now.
And I would rather he not eat at all. And he will tell me that. I feel so much better when I don't eat. That should give you a clue right away that something's amiss. So that peristalsis slows down, the gut motility slows down, everything slows down, and food putrefies way longer than it should. Then they start seeing those symptoms. They have the bacteria going to the wrong place. I'm sure you have had clients say, oh, I've been told I have SIBO. Mm-hmm. That's just translocation of bacteria into the wrong place. Then they try to beat that with a bunch of antibiotics. Antibiotics don't care. They'll kill the good guys and the bad guys. Then you're left with more desert. It's like there's not enough beneficial bacteria going to bat for you. So it becomes this vicious cycle. Mm-hmm. And there are many ways one can go after this or target this. And I feel the best way to do that is start with something that you can control. That's every day of your life, and that's food. That's your lifestyle. If you can walk, you can eat the right kinds of food. Right there, you have some control in your life without taking a bunch of medications that's going to have side effects. I don't think there's any medication without side effects.
Not that I'm aware of. If I know, like, I have a good friend of mine who had Lyme disease, and he reached out, we talked. He was getting a lot of physical symptoms, and we had some really smart doctors on his case. And it was kind of one of these things where we knew that he was gonna kind of get hit by it, but it seemed like all the research we did, he was gonna have to do a strong antibiotic round. He was actively fighting Lyme disease. And he was like, look, let's do it, but I want to be intentional coming out of this about how do I rebuild my gut microbiome. What do you tell people who've had to do that? They've dealt with infection, they've been on antibiotics, whether they knew or not they were going to be dealing with something. What's some things that these people can do to not deal with lingering effects down the road?
Yeah. And like you said, and like this gentleman said, being intentional is good. Sometimes, I mean, antibiotics save your life, and if you have, like, women go through a lot of UTIs, so you need antibiotics to deal with it, to deal with the pain, whatever, or bacterial vaginosis. So many things that women go through, and men too, they have situations where they need antibiotics. But then what happens after you're done with a round of antibiotics is very important. How do you feed your beneficial bacteria? How do you bring some balance back? Do you have keystone species? Are they all killed by the bacteria? In fact, any test that you do, like a gut microbiome test, will always say, if you've been on an antibiotic, wait for about a month before you test. Because our gut microbiome is very resilient, Derek. That's one of the reasons I love working in this field, because a lot of things, like, I want to put on muscle. I'm the skinny Indian girl, right? I take forever to put on muscle. But I have to be patient, and I work out every single day, all of that. But if I wanted things to change in my gut, it's immediate. Within 24 hours, the pattern of our gut microbes changes. So that's good news to anyone who's listening. You make a few changes, your microbial profile changes. So someone on antibiotics can start making shifts right away, eating the right kinds of food, having, like, fermented foods, variety. So in the book, for example, I propose a plan for people. You start with foundational layers. That's your veggies and fruits. God's given you so many different fruits and vegetables. Pick your choice, anything, whatever you want as far as your fruits and vegetables. Then you have enhancers, things like good fats, polyphenols, things that really enhance the microbiome, that increases that keystone species. And then you have functional foods. And functional foods are like, oats, oat bran, beta-glucans, resistant starch. All of these, from research, we know really feed the microbiome. So there's a complete system, and once you understand the system, then it's just a matter of changing the different players or the elements in that system. One day you have broccoli, the next day you have Chinese broccoli, another day you have pomegranate, grapes. Look at the seasons and what the season gives you, and just change it up. It doesn't have to be it's not complicated. Like your friend said, if you're doing protein, fiber, and I would say add in good fats, then I think you're on a good road to recovery after antibiotics.
So there's nothing, that sounds like do more of the good stuff. Is there any, like, supplementation that we need to pay attention to? I got a lot of questions. I'm going to use that as a springboard of, like, prebiotic versus probiotic, and, like, live or not live. What is her thoughts on some of that stuff? So, outside of kind of make sure you're paying attention to that.
Ask you that a lot, like, because takes time to change, right? And it's more of an effort. So us
Like
easy.
everybody wants the shortcut. Let's
Everyone needs a
still start
shortcut.
there. Start at the good stuff. It's like the
Simple.
slowing down to
Is there a
speed
pill
up
I can
idea.
swallow? Is there a pill? First of all, understanding what probiotics are. Probiotics, by definition, is something that confer a benefit to the host, which is us. If it's giving you some kind of benefit, then it's a probiotic. So let's say you have a patient who comes to me saying, Doc, I eat a lot of yogurt. Then the first thing we need to do is, what kind of yogurt is this person eating? And they are saying, oh my gosh, I spent $7 on this yogurt. Then you look at the label, and the yogurt says all kinds of things, sugar, natural flavors, but there's not any mention of the probiotic bacteria. If the strain of the bacteria is not mentioned, I would say put it back on the shelf, because you're wasting your money. You're not growing a darn thing with that yogurt. Instead, if you pick a yogurt that says probiotic culture, BB lactose 12, Lactobacillus reuteri, it's very specific, then I applaud the company. Where they're just not marketing this product, they put enough into it to say these are the strains. And we know from research that BB lactose 12, for example, is great for constipation. Lactobacillus reuteri really helps with intestinal the gut permeability and things like that. So then you become very intentional. And all listeners can do this. And we are living in a world where information's like this. Go to ChatGPT, go to PubMed, and ask questions. What are some strains that have been well studied? You can always pick up my book, which has many, many charts. I had to put that plug in, yeah.
Yeah, we have to.
But really, I mean, you could get information like this. It's not like how when I had gut issues, I had to go sit in the library for hours to research. We don't live in that world anymore. Information is at our fingertips. So we could use that to our advantage and find, you could clearly say to ChatGPT, I am struggling with severe constipation and I'm really looking for a product. I don't have time to change my diet. Be very specific in your prompt. And I'm really looking for something that's going to help my constipation better. Can you come up with a protocol? And I
And
want
can you
this.
answer this in the voice of Anu?
That would be even better. What does Anu say about this? But no, really. Thank you for that. But I'm trying to make this easy and affordable to everyone, right? I mean, we have technology. Why not use it? So, and then you say, make the prompt like, I want it to be probiotics or prebiotics, and don't even talk about a food plan right now. It will come up with all the strains that are researched, because you said, I want research-backed strains. Strains are different from, strains are like you look at the, who's in it, who's in the probiotic, right? And then you say, it'll give you a bunch of things. Are there any brands today that have these strains? Then it'll tell you. There's this Nancy's probiotic yogurt that has BB lactose 12. Did you know? I mean, even 5, 6 years ago, I had to research. I had to go to the grocery store. I had to find all of these products to get that information. Today, it's like you can sit at your computer and get that information. Then take all that information, go to the grocery store, or buy on Instacart. Buy your product. But what you've done is you've been very intentional about which probiotic food to take in. That's about probiotics. But if you're asking me about supplements, completely different. Again, I would say find something that's research backed. Look for a brand that's not spent money just on marketing, but really spent money on research. Do they have some peer review papers? Because we buy into that shiny new object. And there are some good companies out there with good probiotics, so we could do that. And prebiotics are what feed the probiotics or a bacteria, and that's coming from food.
Is there an order that we should go into from like probiotic or prebiotic? Like,
So that depends on who's doing the asking. If someone has SIBO, I would stay away from prebiotics because you don't want to feed, yeah, and you don't know what you're feeding, right? If a person is reasonably healthy, then I would say do both. Do a postbiotic. If you're having some anxiety issues, there are so many strains that are studied today for anxiety. I personally don't have anxiety, but I do have a pretty packed schedule, and that can get me, my aura ring says, you had a little bit more stress than usual. And so I usually take a probiotic that keeps me calm. And in my business, I need to be calm
yeah.
because my clients are not calm. So
Yeah, they don't have healthy guts, so they're staying in fight or flight.
Yeah.
What I like a few areas in the body that are like the lead domino, that if you work to improve that, it seems to put a lot of things in place just to get healthier. And I feel like the gut is one of these areas. Like mental health is another area. If you start putting those places, that the research in place to improve gut, it puts a lot of things just in overall health. And I don't think it's an accident that a lot of the things, we do a lot of regenerative therapy in our practice, and a lot of the things that help our body heal and regenerate healthy tissue start in the gut.
Yeah.
Like you look at a lot of, like we use BPC 157, the peptide, to help heal. And yes, we've seen it accelerate, tendon and muscle healing. But I'm like, look, it starts in the gut, and I don't think that's an accident. As our gut is healthy, our body is healthy, and that's how important it's been for us as a species. I find it very interesting that it's like, oh, how do we get our gut healthier? Make sure we're feeding, make sure we're exercising, make sure we're working on stress and hormone balance. You're like, that sounds like a good life.
Yeah. And sleep, I think, would be something we focus on because what I've seen with the research is when someone loses sleep, they're also losing microbial diversity. There's a connection because we have a diurnal, circadian rhythm, and our gut microbiome follows that. So we are not respecting our circadian rhythm. There's a good chance that they're affected by it. And even one night of poor sleep can cause erratic eating the next day, up to 500 calories more the next day. And I've actually tested this out for me. When I was in the throngs of writing the book, of course, the stress was huge, right? And I would pull all-nighters, getting the deadline and all of that. And the next day, I was definitely not looking for broccoli.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a given that you're looking for ultra-processed foods that are hyper-palatable, that have the fat and the sugar and the flour that make you feel satiated. Just for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it's doing, just for like 5 minutes. And then your brain is asking for more. But at that moment, we don't remember that. I don't remember that. I'm like, oh, where's that cookie? Where's that, And that's, yeah. So sleep really kind of cuts down on that kind of behavior.
Yeah, we do a 2-week, we call it like a tracking boot camp, where we try for just 2 weeks to track everything a year. And like the data we pull from that is incredible to inform like our next 6 months or so. But we track sleep, exercise, diet, energy, and we actually do like a little questionnaire on stress. So for 2 weeks, it's like you track a lot. But we did it this time and we wore a CGM. And the exact same thing. On a bad night's sleep the next day, our glucose regulation is just all over the map. And it coincides very highly with you having cravings for sweets and all that. And I mean, we see it. We saw it very clearly on our little like weekly printout. And so, yeah, that's a very big one of how, like, that's another piece. It all just ties in really well.
And I think that's so connected to insulin resistance, to obesity, and stress. They're all in the same wheelhouse. If you can take care of one thing, you take care of the other two.
So the book can be found, where can people find that? Everywhere?
Yeah, right now on Amazon. Yeah, and it's called Flourish from Within.
Where can people track you? Where can they get in touch with you? I know y'all work with people. Do y'all work with people virtually?
Yes. Post-COVID, my business has been completely virtual because now I have clients all over the country. Yes, and it's 9armsofwellness.com is my website, and Instagram is at 9armsofwellness. So people can call me and, either do a private program, or we have group. Like I said, I have cohorts, and cohorts could be anything from Derek's 10 people who are interested in gut health. That's how I run my programs, because I want them to feel connected, and we live in a world where connections are getting quite dismal.
Yes. Yeah, that is a very deep conversation that we should probably have at some point. We ask all of our guests, I know you've put a lot out there, but if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I want to start somewhere today, where would you tell them to start?
Well, that's a good question. And that's one of those 3 things to do sort of thing, because it depends on the person. But I would say take a good look at food. Food can be poison. Food can be medicine. And you are in control. You decide what it's going to be in your life. And if you just examined just today what's on your plate and take away just 2 or 3 things that you intuitively know, this is not helping me, and replace it with a couple of things that you feel like this is a better choice, I think that's a good enough start for anybody.
I love it. I could not agree more. Yes, everybody, definitely, if you have any interest in gut health, I'll vouch. Flourish from Within is like, I haven't gotten through all of it, but in preparation for this, I've got highlights and notes and stuff just from kind of getting started. So, I love it. I thank you for taking the brain trauma that it is to write a book. I am on the last edit phases. I'll have a book will probably be on shelves like May-ish of 26. I have such a new respect for people who have gone through that process. I don't know if anybody quite knows for their first one what they're getting into, and they're like, you know what? I'm gonna write a book. So
honestly,
thank you for
Derek,
that.
I mean, I think everything is changing with AI, right? How we write, and sometimes like people will say, "Gosh, you should have waited a couple years to write the book. You could have had AI do it." I said, "Oh, that's not the same as you writing it, right?"
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was interviewing editors, and somebody was like, "Have you tried to use AI?" And I was like, "No, I have not." I hear you, but I think I'm
I
a few
mean,
years too late, and I don't know that I trust. I don't know that I trust that yet. But thank you so much. I
you're
appreciate what
welcome.
you're
It
doing
was such a
and putting out
wonderful
there.
conversation. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, love this. Everybody go check her out. Get Flourish from Within. You won't regret it. I've never heard of somebody regretting getting better gut health. I do think it is one of those lead dominoes that just trickles into every area of our lives. So, Anu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah.